Hello, survivors. Do you want to be part of the next stories? Comment below your name and the situation you would like to be in. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's begin. I was checking the chicken coop when I first noticed something was off. The birds were agitated, pacing their enclosure and clucking nervously instead of scratching in the dirt like they normally would on an autumn morning. Bear sensed it too. My German shepherd sat alert at the edge of the property, ears perked forward, nose twitching as he scanned the tree line. "What is it, boy?" I asked, resting my hand on his head. He whined softly but didn't move. I'd been off the grid for 6 years by then. My place sat on 40 acres of woodland in rural Montana, nestled against the mountains with a clear view of Riverdale below. A town of maybe 2,000 people where I'd occasionally venture for supplies I couldn't produce myself. The property had been dirt cheap when I bought it. Nobody wanted land this remote without utilities. But that isolation was exactly what I'd been looking for. My cabin was modest but sturdy. Solar panels on the roof, rainwater collection system, root cellar stocked with preserves and a natural spring that never ran dry. It wasn't fancy, but it was self-sufficient. People in town called me that doomsday nut up on the ridge. My brother stopped visiting after our third argument about how I was wasting my life. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe the world wasn't going to end. But at least I'd find peace before I died. That morning, though, October 17th, the silence was what got to me. Usually I'd hear the distant hum of traffic from the highway, planes crossing overhead every hour or so. But there was nothing. Even the birds had stopped singing. "Something's not right," I muttered, heading back to the cabin. Bear followed close behind, unusually clingy. I tried the radio first, the old hand crank emergency unit I kept charged. Static on every channel, even the government weather station was silent. My satellite phone showed no service. It was expensive and I rarely used it, but it had always connected before. At my workbench, I pulled out my binoculars and walked to the ridge that overlooked Riverdale. What I saw made my blood run cold. Smoke. Not the usual wood stove plumes that dotted the valley in October, but thick black columns rising from at least 3 different spots downtown. Even from 3 miles away, I could see unusual movement in the streets. People running, vehicles moving erratically. "Jesus," I whispered, focusing the binoculars on Main Street. A police car sat sideways across the road, lights flashing silently. 2 officers stood with shotguns, firing into a crowd that pressed toward them. The people, no, not people anymore, moved with heads lolling. One officer went down under the weight of several attackers. I watched, frozen, as they tore into him with their bare hands. I'd read enough books, seen enough movies. I knew what I was looking at, even if my brain rejected the word. "Zombies," I said aloud, the term feeling ridiculous in my mouth. Bear whined again. I wasn't a prepper in the traditional sense. No conspiracy theories on my walls. No obsession with SHTF scenarios. I just wanted simplicity, self-reliance. But I'd planned for emergencies, natural disasters, economic collapse, even pandemic. Just not the Walking Dead. I moved quickly, methodically. First, I checked the fences, 8 feet of chain link topped with barbed wire. Originally installed to keep predators away from my livestock, it now had a more urgent purpose. Next came the water supply. The spring was inside my property line, but I needed to secure it better. Then inventory, 6 months of dried foods, seeds, medical supplies, ammunition. By noon, the smoke from town had thickened. I could hear faint popping sounds, gunfire. Occasionally, a distant scream carried on the wind. Bear paced nervously as I worked, securing windows with the metal shutters I'd installed for winter storms. The first vehicle appeared around 2 p.m., a pickup truck speeding up the dirt road that led to my turnoff. It skidded to a stop at my gate and a man jumped out, wild-eyed, covered in blood. "Help!" he shouted, rattling the locked gate. "For God's sake, let me in!" I approached cautiously, rifle in hand, staying 30 feet back. "What's happening in town?" "They're killing everyone, biting, tearing, my wife." "They got my wife," his voice broke. "Please, I just need somewhere safe." I hesitated. His eyes were clear, his movements normal. The blood on him looked like splatter, not wounds. But I didn't know him. Didn't know if he was infected. Didn't know if he had friends following. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "I can't risk it." His expression hardened. "You selfish bastard, you've got all this space, all this—" "There's a hunting cabin 2 miles east," I cut him off. "It's stocked with some basics, but you can't stay here." He stared at me with pure hatred before spitting on the ground. "People like you deserve what's coming." He climbed back into his truck and sped away, dust billowing behind him. The guilt hit immediately, twisting in my stomach, but I pushed it down. Survival meant hard choices. I'd learned that lesson long before today. By 4 p.m., I'd moved my most critical supplies to the root cellar, a reinforced concrete room beneath the cabin that could double as a bunker. I'd built it 3 years ago after a particularly harsh winter had taught me the value of underground storage that stayed a constant temperature. Now, it might serve as a final refuge. Bears started barking around 4:30. A woman was stumbling up the road on foot, clutching a small boy's hand. They moved slowly, the child limping. "Please," she called out when she saw me. "My son's hurt. We just need water and somewhere to rest." Through my binoculars, I could see they were both filthy, exhausted. The boy couldn't have been more than 7. His pants were torn, knee-bloodied. But was it a bite? I couldn't tell from this distance. "What happened to his leg?" I shouted back. "He fell climbing a fence. Please, we haven't had water since yesterday." I wanted to believe her, but the town water supply would have been running that morning. If they'd been without water since yesterday, they weren't from Riverdale. So where had they come from, and why lie? "There's a stream about a 1/4 mile back down the road," I called. "The water's clean enough if you boil it. I can't let you in." Her face crumpled. "He's just a child." "I'm sorry." The words felt hollow even as I said them. She stood there for a long moment, then turned away, tugging the boy back down the road. He looked over his shoulder at me, eyes wide and frightened. That image would haunt me. I checked my watch. 5:15 p.m. Less than 12 hours since I'd noticed the silence, and already I'd turned away 3 people. What was I becoming? The radio crackled to life suddenly, making me jump. A voice broke through the static. "Emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. A highly contagious pathogen has been reported in multiple cities. Symptoms include high fever, aggression, and disorientation. Infection spreads through bodily fluids, primarily saliva and blood. Avoid all contact with infected individuals. Remain indoors. Do not—" The transmission cut off. I tried every dial, every frequency, but the voice didn't return. Dusk fell, painting the valley in shades of purple and deep blue. The fires in town still burned, their orange glow visible even without binoculars now. Occasionally, I heard the distant rumble of vehicles on the main highway, headed away from Riverdale. People fleeing, seeking safety. I ate a cold dinner, didn't want to risk a cooking fire being visible from the road. Bear sat beside me, tensed and alert. Twice he growled at sounds I couldn't hear. The first of them appeared at the edge of my property just after sunset. A solitary figure. Through my night vision scope, I could see it was a man, his throat torn open, dried blood caked down his front. He bumped mindlessly against my fence, fingers curling in the chain link. I raised my rifle, centered the crosshairs on his forehead and squeezed the trigger. The sound echoed across the valley. He crumpled, motionless. Bear whined, pressing against my leg. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, though nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. Another shot rang out from somewhere in the distance, then another, other survivors defending their territories. I wasn't the only one holding the line. When night fully descended, more of them came, drawn perhaps by the earlier gunshots or simply spreading outward from town. A woman in medical scrubs, her jaw hanging. 2 construction workers, their reflective vests glowing faintly in my scope. A teenage girl, half her face missing, still wearing a Riverdale High Letterman jacket. I picked them off one by one. Each shot felt like a betrayal of something fundamentally human. These weren't targets or game. These had been people with lives, families, dreams. Now they were just shells driven by some primitive hunger I couldn't understand. By midnight, I'd counted 17 of them around my perimeter, shot 8. The others milled about, occasionally clawing at the fence before wandering off into the darkness. That's when I heard it, the bleating of my goats from their pen on the far side of the property. Panicked, desperate sounds that cut through the night. No, 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 I muttered, grabbing my shotgun and headlamp. Bear was already racing ahead of me, his black form barely visible in the darkness. I found the pen's gate torn open. 2 of my goats lay in the dirt, their throats ripped out. The third was backed into a corner, bleeding in terror as a figure hunched over the carcass of the fourth, tearing at the flesh with bloody hands. It looked up at my approach and I nearly vomited. It had been a child once. Now its face was a torn mask, eyes milky white, teeth bared in a crimson grin. It lunged at me with unnatural speed. Bear got there first, launching himself at the creature. They tumbled to the ground. My dog's jaws clamped on its arm. "Bear, no!" I shouted, but it was too late. The thing twisted with inhuman strength, its free hand gouging into Bear's side. My dog yelped in pain. I fired the shotgun. The blast caught the zombie in the chest, throwing it back against the fence. It tried to rise again, but my second shot took its head off. Bear limped to my side, whimpering. I checked him frantically, my hands shaking. The creature's nails had torn his skin, but there were no bite marks. Small mercy. I looked around at my ruined livestock pen. All those careful preparations, years of building self-sufficiency, and in one night, a quarter of my food supply was gone. How long before they breached the fence? How long before they found a way into the cabin? As I secured the pen and treated Bear's wounds back at the cabin, a horrible thought formed. I wasn't prepared for this, not really. My isolation, my stockpiles, my defenses, they had given me a head start, nothing more. The world I'd left behind was gone, and its death throes were climbing the ridge toward me, one shambling step at a time. Dawn broke with an eerie stillness. I'd barely slept, keeping watch from the cabin's loft with my rifle across my lap. Bear lay beside me, his breathing shallow but steady. The makeshift bandage I'd wrapped around his torso was holding, though I'd need to clean the wound again soon. "We made it through the night, boy," I whispered, scratching behind his ears. He thumped his tail weakly against the floor. Outside, the morning mist hung heavy over the property, obscuring the fence line. I couldn't see if any more of those things were out there, waiting. My remaining goats huddled together in the corner of their pen, silent and frightened. The chickens wouldn't leave their coop. My name is Mason Fletcher, former construction foreman turned homesteader. Divorced, no kids. No one who'd miss me except maybe Bear. When I'd left civilization behind, I'd done it to escape the noise, the pressure, the endless consumption. Never imagined I'd be witnessing the end of it all from my mountain perch. After changing Bear's bandage and feeding him, I forced myself to venture outside. The air smelled wrong, like burnt plastic carried on the wind from town. The fence had held overnight, though several sections were bent inward from the weight of bodies pressing against it. 8 corpses lay where I'd shot them, flies already gathering despite the autumn chill. "Need to burn them," I muttered to myself. "Can't risk disease spreading, even if this wasn't a normal disease." I spent the morning reinforcing the fence with extra wire and wooden supports. Every few minutes I'd scan the tree line, expecting more of them to emerge from the shadows. But for now, at least, the property was clear. Around 10 I heard it, the distinctive rumble of a motorcycle engine growing louder as it approached from the road below. I grabbed my rifle and moved to the front gate. Bear tried to follow, limping badly. "Stay," I ordered firmly. He whined but obeyed, watching anxiously from the porch. The motorcycle appeared through the trees, a battered Harley, its rider hunched low over the handlebars. He slowed as he approached my gate, cutting the engine. The sudden silence felt oppressive. "Hello in there," the rider called, removing his helmet. He looked to be in his 40s, bearded with military-style cropped hair. "Name's Tucker. Looking for safe passage." I kept my rifle visible but pointed downward. There's no passage through here. This is the end of the road. Tucker glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. I'm not infected. Just need somewhere to catch my breath. Been riding since last night. Where from? I asked, not moving closer. Helena. That was over 100 miles away. It's gone, completely overrun. Military tried to set up blockades, but… He trailed off, shaking his head. Sorry to hear it, I said, meaning it. But I can't help you. Tucker's shoulders slumped. He looked exhausted, desperate. Look, I've got supplies, food, ammo. We could trade. Before I could answer, movement in the trees caught my eye. One of them, a woman, emerged onto the road behind Tucker. Her right arm hung at a strange angle, broken perhaps, and her neck was a mess of torn flesh. Behind you, I warned, raising my rifle. Tucker spun, too late. She was on him in an instant, teeth snapping. He shoved her back, scrambling for a weapon, but his foot slipped on loose gravel. They both went down. I had a clear shot, could have taken her out easy, but Tucker was thrashing, the two of them rolling in the dirt. I might hit him instead. Hold her still, I shouted, trying to line up the shot. Tucker screamed, a raw animal sound that cut through the morning air. She had him by the forearm, teeth sunk deep into flesh. Blood spurted as he finally managed to throw her off, staggering to his feet. My shot caught her in the temple as she lunged again. She dropped instantly, a marionette with cut strings. Tucker clutched his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. His eyes met mine, wide with terror and realization. Help me, he pleaded. Please, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not. But we both knew. I'd heard the CDC broadcast. Infection through bodily fluids. Primary transmission, saliva and blood. He was already dead, just didn't know it yet. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it this time. How long do you think you have? He looked down at his arm, the jagged bite already swelling. The others I saw, maybe an hour. Some turned faster. I nodded slowly. There's a clearing about half a mile down that trail. I pointed east. Nice view of the valley, peaceful. Tucker understood what I was offering, a place to end things on his own terms. Thanks, he whispered, retrieving a pistol from his saddlebag. Our eyes met once more, a moment of grim solidarity between survivors. Then he climbed back on his motorcycle and drove away. The gunshot echoed across the valley 20 minutes later. I closed my eyes briefly, offering a silent acknowledgement of another life lost to whatever hell this was. By noon, the fires in Riverdale had mostly burned out, black smoke giving way to thin gray wisps. I watched through binoculars as figures shambled through the streets below. So many of them. Too many for a town that small. They must have been coming in from the highway, drawn by whatever vestiges of life remained. I was securing the chicken coop when I heard Bear barking, sharp, aggressive sounds unlike his usual alerts. I grabbed the shotgun I'd been keeping slung across my back and ran toward the commotion. A man stood outside my back fence, hands raised in a gesture of peace. He wore dirty hospital scrubs and had a stethoscope around his neck. I'm a doctor, he called when he saw me. Dr. Elliot Parker, I'm not armed. Bear continued barking, hackles raised. He didn't usually react this way to ordinary people. Stay back, I ordered, keeping the shotgun trained on him. What do you want? I was working at Riverdale Memorial when it happened, he explained, keeping his hands visible. I've been hiding in the woods since yesterday. Saw the smoke from your chimney. I hadn't lit my stove since yesterday morning. There was no smoke. You look injured, I said, noticing how he favored his left side, keeping it turned away from me. Cracked ribs, I think. Got trampled during the evacuation. Bear's barking intensified. He knew something I didn't. Turn around. Slowly, I commanded. Dr. Parker hesitated, then complied. The left side of his scrubs was soaked with blood, a ragged tear in the fabric revealing an unmistakable bite wound just above his hip. You're infected. Not a question. His shoulders slumped. Please, I'm a doctor. I know the protocols. Quarantine me. I can help you understand this thing, study it. Maybe find a way to… There's no cure for this, we both know that. You can't know that. His voice rose, desperate. This just started. We need to study it, understand the progression. I can document my symptoms, give you valuable data before—" He trailed off. For a moment I considered it. Information was precious. Understanding what we were facing might save lives, but the risk— "How long since you were bitten?" "About 3 hours," he admitted. "No fever yet, no aggression. I'm still me." That wasn't long enough. I'd seen how quickly the change could happen. "I'm sorry," I said for the 3rd time that day. "I can't risk it." His face contorted with rage. "You selfish bastard, I could help people. My research could save thousands." "Then write it down," I suggested, nodding to a small notebook visible in his breast pocket. "Leave your notes somewhere they'll be found, but you can't stay here." Dr. Parker stared at me with hatred, then turned and limped away, muttering curses. I watched until he disappeared among the trees, wondering if I'd just turned away humanity's best hope or saved myself from certain death. No way to know. The afternoon stretched on, each hour marked by increasing tension. I repaired what I could, prepared what food remained, treated Bear's wound again. The dog was improving, though still moving gingerly. The bite I feared hadn't materialized. Small mercies. Just before sunset, I heard an engine again, a truck this time by the sound of it. I grabbed my rifle and moved to the front gate. Bear followed despite my orders to stay, limping but determined to protect me. The vehicle that appeared was a Forest Service pickup, mud-spattered but intact. It stopped 50 yards from my gate. 2 people emerged, a woman in ranger gear and a heavy-set man in flannel and jeans. "Hello?" the woman called, waving. "We're with Forest Service, just checking on residents in the area." I kept my distance, studying them through my scope. Both appeared uninjured, moving normally. The woman was maybe 30, with her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The man was older, bearded, carrying a shotgun but holding it properly. Barrel pointed downward. "I'm Ranger Collins," she continued when I didn't respond. "This is Vincent White, Volunteer Fire Department." "Mason," I finally replied. "What's the situation in town?" They exchanged glances. "Bad," Vincent said. "Real bad. Riverdale's gone. We're trying to reach people in the outlying areas. Direct them to the emergency shelter at Coldwater Dam. Military's setting up there," Ranger Collins added. "Food, medical care, protection." It sounded rehearsed. Too clean in a world coming apart. "You two seem awfully calm for people who just watched their town fall," I observed. Another glance between them. Something was off. "We've been trained for emergency scenarios," Collins explained. "Are you here alone?" I didn't answer that. "How many at this shelter?" "About 50 so far," Vincent said. "We're hoping to—" Bear began growling, low and threatening. "Quiet your dog," Collins snapped, her calm demeanor slipping. That's when I noticed Marcus shifting position, trying to get an angle on the lock of my gate. And the bulge under Collins's jacket. Not a standard-issue Ranger sidearm. Something bigger. "I appreciate the information," I said carefully, "but I'm staying put." "That's not really an option," Collins replied, her voice hardening. "We need your supplies. The shelter is short on everything." And there it was, not Rangers, not help. Just people taking what they needed to survive. "You should leave," I said, raising my rifle slightly. "Now." Vincent laughed. "One guy with a rifle? There are 8 of us all together. We've been watching you all day. We know about your livestock, your solar setup. That's a nice cache you've got." 8? I scanned the tree line but saw no one else. Were they bluffing? "Last chance," Collins called. "Come to the shelter willingly. Bring what you can carry. Or we take everything and leave you with nothing." "You're not taking anything," I replied. "And there is no shelter, is there?" The charade dropped. Collins pulled the concealed weapon, a compact submachine gun. Vincent raised his shotgun. "Have it your way," she said coldly. I fired first, aiming for Vincent. The shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Collins opened fire, bullets pinging off the metal gate. I dropped to the ground, Bear crouching beside me. The forest erupted with gunfire. They hadn't been bluffing. More attackers emerged from the trees, firing wildly. I crawled backward, using the slight rise of land as cover. Bear stayed with me, growling continuously. When I reached the cabin, I slipped inside and barricaded the door. The windows were already shuttered, but I added extra reinforcement, furniture pushed against the walls, anything to slow them down. "They want supplies," I muttered to Bear. "They'll try to wait us out." The shooting had stopped. They were conserving ammunition, probably planning their next move. I checked my own, 40 rounds for the rifle, 26 for the shotgun, 15 for the handgun. Not enough for a prolonged siege. Darkness fell quickly. I moved through the cabin by feel, not risking a light that might give away my position. Outside, I could hear them moving around the perimeter of my fence, testing for weaknesses. An occasional muffled voice, the crackle of a radio, then a new sound, distant at first, then growing stronger. Moans. Many of them. The gunfire must have drawn the infected from miles around. I peered through a narrow gap in the shutters and saw them, shambling figures emerging from the forest. Dozens of them. Some fresh, still recognizably human. Others decayed, faces slack with death, movements jerky and erratic. A shout went up from one of the attackers. They'd spotted the horde too. More gunfire erupted, desperate now. I heard Collins screaming orders, the roar of the pickup's engine. But there were too many infected closing in, their moans drowning out the human voices. I should have felt relief. The infected were solving my problem for me. But as darkness claimed the valley and the screams of the living mixed with the groans of the dead, I felt only a cold, creeping dread. This night was far from over, and when dawn came, a new threat would be waiting. I spent the night listening to people die. First came the organized gunfire as Collins and her group engaged the infected. Then the screams, ragged, desperate sounds that broke off one by one. By midnight, only the moans remained, punctuated occasionally by a single gunshot when someone chose a quick end over being torn apart. Bear huddled against me in the darkness, sensing my tension. I kept one hand on his back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. My other hand never left my rifle. Dawn arrived with eerie calm. The moans had faded, the infected either wandering off or lying dormant in the morning chill. I peered through a gap in the shutters, scanning the property. My fence had held, but barely. Multiple sections leaned inward, chain link stretched and bent. I waited another hour, then ventured outside with Bear limping faithfully behind me. The Forest Service truck still sat where they'd parked it, driver's door hanging open. Blood darkened the ground around it. No bodies, though. Those who'd fallen had either risen again or been devoured completely. As I turned to leave, I noticed fresh boot prints leading away from the scene. Someone had survived and fled on foot. The tracks led to my fence line, where the gate hung partially open, continuing inside my property toward the barn. "Son of a bitch," I muttered, raising my shotgun. Bear growled, sensing my alarm. The barn door was ajar. I positioned myself beside the opening, listening. Nothing but the soft shuffling of my remaining livestock inside. "Anyone in there, come out now," I called. "I'm armed." Silence. I nudged the door wider with my boot. Sunlight spilled across the dirt floor, illuminating straw bales and farm equipment. Nothing seemed disturbed. Movement flickered in my peripheral vision. Something swung toward my head. A shovel, glinting in the sunlight. I ducked, but not fast enough. Metal struck my shoulder, sending pain shooting down my arm. The shotgun clattered to the ground. Bear lunged, teeth bared. A man's shout echoed through the barn as they collided. I scrambled for my weapon, but a boot kicked it away. A hand grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. "Don't move," a woman's voice hissed. The cold press of a gun barrel against my temple froze me in place. Collins. Her face came into view as she circled around, keeping the gun trained on me. Blood matted her hair on one side, and her ranger uniform was shredded and gore-spattered. "Call off your dog," she ordered. Bear had a man pinned in the corner. Vincent, his wounded shoulder now bandaged with what looked like torn shirt fabric. Two others stood nearby, a gaunt man with a machete and a teenage boy wielding my missing shovel. "Bear, heel," I said reluctantly. The dog backed off, still growling. "Someone control that mutt," Collins snapped. The teenager, Adam, stepped forward hesitantly. The gaunt man, Derek, moved with surprising speed. His boot connected with Bear's ribs, sending my dog sprawling with a pained yelp. "No!" I lunged forward only to be driven to my knees by Collins' gun against my head. "Tie him," she ordered Adam, who produced zip ties from his pocket. As he secured my wrists behind my back, I watched Bear struggle to his feet, still growling despite the pain. "That dog's going to be a problem," Derek said, eyes cold. Before I could speak, he raised the machete. "Don't you dare," I started. "Shut up," Collins cut me off. "We can't have that dog protecting you or attacking us." Bear lunged at Derek, sensing the threat. The machete flashed in the barn's dim light, a sickening thud, then a whimper. Bear collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. Something broke inside me. I screamed, a primal sound of rage and loss that seemed to come from somewhere beyond conscious thought. Collins's boot caught me in the chest, driving me back down. "Enough! One more move and you join the dog." I stared at Bear's still form, my vision blurring with tears and rage. "I'm going to kill you," I said quietly, with absolute certainty. "All of you." They marched me to the cabin, leaving Bear's body behind. Inside, they went through my supplies methodically. Vincent claimed my bed, his injury taking a toll. Adam found my food stores and began eating ravenously. Derek discovered my gun safe. "Locked," he reported. "Where's the key?" I said nothing. The key was hidden in a hollowed-out book, but they'd have to figure that out themselves. Collins grabbed my chin. "Listen carefully, we're not monsters, but we will hurt you if we have to. Where's the key?" I stared at her, memorizing every feature of her face. "Go to hell." They secured me to a kitchen chair with more zip ties, tightening them until they cut into my skin. I focused on working my wrists subtly against the plastic bindings. Every survivor learns patience. Hours passed. They settled into my home, planning how to distribute the space among themselves. I watched silently, feeling the zip ties gradually loosen as I worked them against the rough edge of the chair. By late afternoon, their guard had relaxed. Vincent was sleeping fitfully, his wound clearly infected. Adam had taken up position as lookout on the porch. Derek was inventorying my tools in the barn. Collins sat cleaning her weapons at my kitchen table. "Why did you do it?" I asked quietly. "Turn on other survivors?" She didn't look up. "We tried the cooperative approach at first. 15 of us pooling resources. Know what happened? The strongest took the most, the weakest starved, human nature." She met my eyes. "Better to be the predator than the prey in this new world." A shout from outside interrupted us. Adam burst through the door. "Collins, we got 'em all." She rose, frowning. "Got what?" "The infected. Those stragglers from last night. Derek found them in the ravine east of here. They were trapped in the mud. Easy pickings." Collins's face broke into a rare smile. "How many?" 8. That's all that were left from last night's bunch. Derek's bringing proof now." Derek appeared in the doorway moments later, carrying a blood-soaked sack. "Got the heads," he announced, dropping the makeshift trophy onto my kitchen floor. "No more walking corpses on our property." "Our property," I repeated, the words bitter in my mouth. Collins ignored me. "Vincent, wake up. Time to celebrate." Vincent emerged from the bedroom, pale but more alert. Adam retrieved a bottle of my homemade apple brandy. They gathered around the table, pouring generous measures into my ceramic mugs. "To survival," Collins toasted. "To our new home," Vincent added. "To not being eaten alive," Derek said with a dark laugh. They drank deeply, the day's tension visibly leaving their bodies. A second round followed, then a third. Their voices grew louder, their guard slipping. "What about him?" Adam asked eventually, nodding toward me. Collins considered me through slightly unfocused eyes. "We keep him around until we learn everything about this place." "And then?" Derek pressed. She shrugged. "Then he's expendable." My wrists finally slipped free from the loosened zip ties. I kept my hands behind my back, waiting. Patience. Vincent's head drooped, the combination of alcohol and fever taking its toll. Adam was laughing at something Derek said, his back to me. Collins had set her gun on the table, just out of her immediate reach. Now! I surged from the chair, diving for the kitchen counter where the knife block stood. My hand closed around the handle of my butcher knife as Collins shouted in alarm. Before any of them could react, I'd crossed the small space and buried the blade deep in Derek's neck. Payback for Bear. Blood sprayed across the table as he clutched at the wound. Adam scrambled backward. Collins lunged for her gun, but I was faster, driven by a cold rage that made everything around me seem to move in slow motion. I caught her wrist, twisting until bones snapped. She screamed, the gun falling from her useless hand. I grabbed it and fired point blank into Vincent's chest as he struggled to rise. He collapsed without a sound. Adam cowered in the corner, hands raised. "Please," he begged. "I didn't want to hurt your dog. That was Derek." I looked at him. Just a kid, maybe 16. For a moment, mercy flickered in my heart. Then I remembered Bear's whimper as the machete struck home. "You stood by and watched," I said quietly. "That's the same as doing it yourself." His eyes widened in understanding a moment before I pulled the trigger. Silence fell over the cabin, broken only by Colin's ragged breathing as she clutched her broken wrist. She stared at me with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. "You were right," she gasped. "You're dangerous." "I told you I'd kill you all," I reminded her. "I keep my promises." "So do it then," she challenged. "Finish the job." "No, not yet." I tied her to the same chair they'd used for me, then went to work. I dragged the bodies outside, one by one. No burial, no ceremony. Just hauled them to the far corner of my property and left them for nature to reclaim. Next, I walked to the barn. Bear lay where he'd fallen, his fur matted with dried blood. I knelt beside him, throat tight with grief. "I'm sorry. Boy," I whispered. "They paid for what they did." I buried him under the old oak tree where he used to lie in the summer shade, watching me work the garden. By the time I returned to the cabin, the sun was setting. Collins glared at me, but her defiance had faded, replaced by the first flickers of fear. "What are you going to do with me?" she asked. I ignored the question, checking my property through the windows. No sign of infected. "The fence needs reinforcing," I said finally. "Double layer of chain link, maybe concrete footings." "Mason," Collins said, her voice softening. "I get it, we crossed a line. But we can still work together. 2 survivors are better than 1. I turned to her. "We're not survivors, not yet. We're just not dead." "Then let me help you survive," she pleaded. "I've got skills, military training." "You killed my dog," I interrupted. "The last living creature in this world that I cared about." Her face paled. "It was Derek, I never ordered that." "You didn't stop it either." I picked up the gun, "But you're right about one thing. Your skills will help me survive." Hope flickered in her eyes. "So you'll untie me?" "No," I said coldly. "I'm going to learn everything you know first, every trick, every tactic. And then I'll decide." I spent the next hour gathering materials, ignoring Colin's alternating pleas and threats. By nightfall, I'd patched the worst sections of fence and set up early warning systems. Tin cans on fishing line strung between trees. "You know I'm right," she said when I returned. "About human nature. The strong survive, the weak don't. I considered this as I cleaned my recovered weapons. You mistake cruelty for strength. It's not the same thing." "Tell that to your dog," she shot back. Something dark and cold unfolded inside me at her words. "I never claimed to be a good man," I said quietly. "Just a prepared one." Outside, night had fully fallen. The property was silent except for the distant hoot of an owl. No moans of the infected, no gunfire, no screams. Just the usual sounds of the wilderness I'd chosen as my home years ago. This place was mine again. Secured with blood, defended with violence. I'd need to rebuild parts, strengthen others, replace the livestock eventually. Most importantly, I'd need to change. The man who'd turned away survivors because he feared what they might bring. He'd been too soft. The world had changed, and I would need to change with it. I looked at Collins, tied to the chair, defiance still glinting in her eyes despite her fear. She'd been wrong about many things, but right about one. In this new world, you were either predator or prey, and I'd be damned if I'd ever be prey again. Get some sleep, I told her, checking her bonds one last time. Tomorrow we start your first lesson. As I turned away, I caught my reflection in the window glass. Behind me, the cabin was a tableau of order restored through violence. Outside, my property lay secure again, protected by fences, traps, and now a willingness to do whatever was necessary. The world had ended for most of humanity, but for me, it was just taking a darker turn, one I was finally ready to embrace.